She thought she could have a black man removed from first class with just a few carefully chosen words, until he calmly reached into his pocket and flashed his Homeland Security badge. Elizabeth Harrington's perfectly planned New York trip was about to become her worst nightmare, all because she couldn't accept who was sitting beside her. Elizabeth Harrington strode through O'Hare International Airport with practiced confidence. As CEO of Harrington Investments, she'd made the Chicago to New York route countless times. First class was her domain, a sanctuary of privilege where she expected a certain caliber of traveler. Her Louboutin heels clicked purposefully across the terminal floor, designer carry-on trailing behind. The priority boarding, the champagne welcome, the hushed professional conversations, these were her entitlements. She'd built her reputation on exclusivity, and she expected her travel experience to match. When she approached row 2, Elizabeth froze momentarily. A black man in a tailored charcoal suit occupied the window seat beside hers. Marcus Reynolds was focused on his laptop, fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard. Documents with official-looking headers filled his screen. Elizabeth's smile tightened as she stowed her bag overhead. This wasn't what she'd anticipated. First class had always been her refuge from diversity. She settled into her seat with deliberate stiffness, creating as much distance as the premium cabin allowed. "Excuse me," she said, voice dripping with manufactured politeness. "I believe you might be in the wrong seat." Marcus barely glanced up. "2B, this is my seat." His tone was neutral, professional, the voice of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Elizabeth's jaw clenched. This wouldn't do at all. Elizabeth's manicured finger jabbed the call button. Her patience was wearing thin. The flight attendant, Jessica Miller, appeared with a professional smile. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Elizabeth leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I believe there's been a mix-up with the seating arrangements." She gestured subtly toward Marcus, who continued working, seemingly oblivious. Jessica checked her tablet. "Your seat is 2A, and Mr. Reynolds is in 2B. Everything appears correct." "Are you certain?" Elizabeth's tone sharpened. "I find it unusual." Her emphasis carried unmistakable implications. Jessica's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened slightly. "Yes, ma'am. Both passengers have valid first-class tickets for these assigned seats." Marcus continued typing, his composed demeanor unbroken. The glow from his laptop illuminated his focused expression as he reviewed what appeared to be security briefings. Elizabeth's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, I suppose mistakes happen," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jessica hesitated, sensing the tension. "Is there anything else I can assist you with?" "Not at the moment," Elizabeth replied icily, turning toward the window. As Jessica walked away, Elizabeth's fingers drummed against the armrest. This situation was far from resolved. 10 minutes passed. Elizabeth sat rigidly, her discomfort growing with each passing moment. The plane was nearly full now, passengers settling into their seats. She couldn't tolerate this arrangement for a 3-hour flight. She pressed the call button again. Jessica returned, her smile slightly more reserved. "Yes, Ms. Harrington?" "I'd like to request a seat change," Elizabeth stated firmly. Several heads turned in their direction. "Is there an issue with your seat?" Jessica asked. Elizabeth hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I'm uncomfortable with my current seating arrangement." Her eyes darted meaningfully toward Marcus. Jessica understood immediately. "I see. Let me check if we have any other first-class seats available." She tapped her tablet, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "I'm sorry. We're at full capacity in first class today." "What about business class?" Elizabeth pressed. "That's also full. I could check economy." "Economy?" Elizabeth's voice rose sharply. A businessman across the aisle glanced up from his newspaper. "That's completely unacceptable." Marcus paused his typing momentarily, then resumed without acknowledging the conversation. "I'm afraid those are your options, Ms. Harrington," Jessica replied evenly. "Remain in your assigned seat, or move to economy if a seat becomes available." Elizabeth's face flushed. "So you're telling me I have no choice but to sit here?" Your assigned seat is 2A, yes. A young woman 3 rows back subtly angled her phone toward them. Elizabeth noticed and stiffened further. This is ridiculous, she muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The plane began taxiing. Elizabeth's anxiety escalated with each announcement from the cockpit. She couldn't accept the situation, wouldn't accept it. Her finger stabbed the call button again. Jessica approached, her professional demeanor now tinged with wariness. Ms. Harrington? Elizabeth straightened in her seat. It was time for her trump card. I need to speak with the captain, she demanded. The captain is preparing for takeoff. I'm the lead flight attendant. How can I help? Elizabeth lowered her voice dramatically. I don't feel safe. The cabin went silent. Those 3 words, carefully chosen, deliberately deployed, changed everything. Marcus finally looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable. Jessica's posture stiffened. Could you clarify what you mean by that, ma'am? I just don't feel comfortable, safe, with the seating arrangement, Elizabeth emphasized, glancing pointedly at Marcus. I think it would be best if someone else took this seat. A passenger across the aisle muttered, Unbelievable. The young woman with the phone was now openly recording. Jessica's voice dropped, becoming steel-edged. Ms. Harrington, are you suggesting you feel threatened by Mr. Reynolds? I'm not suggesting anything, Elizabeth replied. I'm simply stating I feel unsafe, and I believe the airline has a responsibility to accommodate me. By moving him to economy? Jessica clarified, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Yes, exactly. Elizabeth nodded, missing the collective intake of breath around her. Jessica squared her shoulders. That won't be happening. Mr. Reynolds has a valid first-class ticket and has done absolutely nothing wrong. What you're asking for isn't accommodation. It's discrimination. Murmurs of approval rippled through the cabin. Someone whispered, She's filming this whole thing. This is outrageous. Elizabeth hissed, I want to speak to your supervisor immediately. Ms. Harrington, Jessica's tone was final. You have 2 options. Remain in your assigned seat without further disruption, or I can have the aircraft return to gate and you can deplane. Which would you prefer? A tense silence hung in the air. Elizabeth's face flushed with humiliation and anger. Passengers watched intently, waiting for her next move. This is discrimination against me, she insisted, voice trembling. I have rights as a passenger. It was then that Marcus finally closed his laptop. With deliberate calm, he reached into his inner jacket pocket. Elizabeth flinched slightly, her imagination running wild. What Marcus produced wasn't a business card or a complaint form. It was a leather credential wallet. He flipped it open with practiced ease, revealing a gleaming gold badge and official identification. Department of Homeland Security. He stated evenly, Ms. Harrington, if you genuinely feel unsafe, I'd be happy to take your official statement. We can document the specific behaviors that are causing your distress. The cabin erupted in poorly concealed reactions, a few gasps, several chuckles, and one clear, oh snap, from the back. I can ensure it's properly filed with the Federal Air Marshal Service, Marcus continued, his tone professional but eyes unyielding. Given your serious safety concerns on a federal flight, we should address this immediately. Elizabeth's mouth opened, then closed, her face drained of color. The young woman recording whispered audibly to her seatmate, This is going viral for sure. Elizabeth had never felt so trapped in her life. The flight attendant moved away, suppressing a smile. Elizabeth sat frozen, staring straight ahead, her mind racing through the implications. Marcus had already reopened his laptop, returning to work as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and it was still happening. Elizabeth's phone vibrated in her purse. Then again, and again, with trembling fingers, she retrieved it, unlocking the screen to find a barrage of notifications. A text from her assistant. Is this you? Video going viral. Another from a board member. Call me immediately. Her stomach plummeted as she opened Twitter. The video was already there, uploaded less than 3 minutes ago, with the caption, Racist CO tries to remove black federal agent from first class, claims she doesn't feel safe. Watch what happens next. Hashtag flying while black, hashtag racism. It had 12,000 views already. As she watched, the counter jumped to 15,000. Elizabeth scrolled through comments with mounting horror. The look on her face when he pulled out that badge, faced with tears of joy. Another Karen gets what she deserves. I hope her company is paying attention. Her company. Oh, God. Harrington Investments prided itself on diversity initiatives and inclusion programs, all carefully crafted by her PR team. This would destroy everything. She glanced around the cabin. At least 5 passengers were on their phones, undoubtedly sharing the video further. The young woman who'd recorded it was typing rapidly, probably adding context, names, details. Elizabeth's carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time at 30,000 feet, with nowhere to escape, and they hadn't even reached cruising altitude. 3 hours later, the plane touched down at LaGuardia. Elizabeth had spent the entire flight in silent agony, watching her reputation disintegrate in real time. The video had reached over 1 million views. Her name was trending. News outlets had picked up the story. As passengers prepared to deplane, Elizabeth noticed several people pointing phones in her direction. She'd become an exhibit, a cautionary tale. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York," the captain announced. "Local time is 2:15 p.m. Please remain seated until we reach the gate." Elizabeth's phone rang again, her PR director's 5th call. She'd ignored them all. What could possibly be said to fix this? When the seatbelt sign finally dinged off, Marcus stood, retrieving his carry-on with efficient movements. He glanced down at Elizabeth, his expression professional but unyielding. "Safe travels, Ms. Harrington," he said simply, before moving toward the exit. Elizabeth waited until most passengers had deplaned before gathering her belongings. As she stepped into the jetway, she saw them, 3 reporters with microphones, waiting in the terminal. "Ms. Harrington, can you comment on the video showing you attempting to have a federal agent removed from first class? Harrington Investments has issued a statement distancing themselves from your actions. Your response?" She pushed past them, head down, rushing toward the exit. Her phone buzzed with a text from the chairman of Harrington Investments. "Emergency board meeting called. 4 p.m. Your presence required." Outside, she barely made it into a taxi before breaking down. The driver glanced in the rear-view mirror. "Rough day." Elizabeth couldn't answer. Her phone chimed with an email notification. Subject line: termination of employment. She'd built her career over 30 years. It had taken just 30 minutes to destroy it. Meanwhile, Marcus Reynolds continued his day, attending his scheduled security briefing at the federal building. The incident already fading from his mind. Just another day as a black professional in America. 1 week later, Elizabeth sat alone in her Upper East Side apartment, staring at the Wall Street Journal article detailing her spectacular fall from grace. The video had amassed over 20 million views. Late-night comedians had incorporated it into their monologues. She'd become a meme, a punchline, a case study in privilege and consequences. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with business opportunities, now remained silent. Friends had distanced themselves. 3 charity boards had requested her resignation. The diversity training company she'd hired for Harrington Investments had issued a public statement severing ties. Elizabeth had always believed her position insulated her from consequences. For decades, that had been true. But social media had changed the rules. Accountability was now swift, public, and merciless. She opened her laptop, typing "how to rebuild reputation after viral scandal" into the search bar. The results were overwhelming and discouraging. This wasn't something a PR firm could fix with a carefully worded apology. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Reynolds continued his work unbothered, the incident already fading into just another story in his professional life. If this story made you think about the power dynamics we navigate daily, hit that like button. Have you witnessed similar situations in your travels? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember, in today's connected world, accountability is just one viral video away. Subscribe for more real-life stories that make us reflect on our society and the changes happening around us.